I'm Jennifer, 29, female. I live in a small but comfortable apartment downtown, the kind with big windows that make the city feel like a living piece of art. For the last 5 years, my life was my job as a human resources manager at a fast-growing tech firm called Innovatech. I poured everything I had into building a department from the ground up, creating a team that was more like a family. It was my professional masterpiece until my boss decided to tear it all down for a so-called golden hire, not knowing that in HR, we're the ones who keep all the receipts. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. When I joined Innovatech as its first ever HR hire, the department was just a dusty filing cabinet and a stack of outdated compliance posters. I was 24, full of ambition, and maybe a little naive. The company was a chaotic startup, a whirlwind of brilliant engineers and aggressive salespeople who saw HR as nothing more than the hiring and firing police. My mission was to change that perception. I wanted to build a culture, not just a workforce. My first real hire was Ben Carter. He was fresh out of college, a 22-year-old with a nervous energy but eyes that absorbed everything. He was sharp, empathetic, and fiercely loyal. Together, we transformed that dusty corner into a functioning, respected department. We implemented a fair compensation structure, launched a wellness program that actually helped people, and streamlined the recruitment process to bring in top talent. Over the next 5 years, our team grew to 4 people. There was Maria from payroll, who could spot a numerical error from a mile away, and Tom, our benefits specialist, who treated every employee's problem as his own. We were efficient, we were respected, and we genuinely cared about the people we worked for. We weren't just colleagues, we were a unit. We had each other's backs, the company flourished. We went from a 50-person startup to a 300-employee enterprise. The chaos of the early days was replaced by structure, much of which we had built. My direct supervisor was the CEO, a reasonable man who trusted my judgment. But as we grew, a new layer of management was introduced. That's when Michael Clark, the director of sales, was given oversight of HR. On the surface, it made some sense. Sales was the biggest department, and Michael was a company star. He was charismatic, slick, and had a reputation for getting what he wanted. He always spoke in corporate buzzwords like synergy and optimization, but I always felt there was something hollow behind his smile. He saw people as numbers on a spreadsheet, assets to be leveraged or liabilities to be cut. Our people-first philosophy clashed with his profit, costs mentality from day one. He'd often try to bend hiring rules for a promising salesperson or argue against a wellness initiative, calling it a superfluous expense. I held my ground, armed with data and company policy, and for a while I was able to keep his influence at bay. I thought my team's track record of success and the positive employee feedback we consistently received made us untouchable. I believed that good, honest work would always be enough to protect us. I was wrong. The shift began subtly. Michael started talking about restructuring for next-gen growth in management meetings. He wanted to bring in a senior HR strategist to, in his words, elevate our human capital initiatives. I argued that my team was already handling strategy effectively and that any new hire should be at a coordinator level to support our existing structure. We don't need another chief, I told him in a private meeting. We need more hands on deck. Michael just smiled his polished, empty smile. Jennifer, you've done great work, but we're playing in the big leagues now. We need someone with a different perspective, someone who can disrupt the old models. It felt like a direct insult to everything I had built. A week later, Jessica Miller was hired. She was 31, impeccably dressed, and radiated an unearned confidence. Her resume was adequate. It listed experience at a few mid-level companies, but nothing that screamed strategist or disruptor. During her interview loop, which Michael insisted on fast-tracking, my team gave lukewarm feedback. Ben noted she was vague on key performance metrics. Maria found her answers on compliance to be textbook at best. I voiced these concerns to Michael, but he waved them away. She's a rock star, Jennifer, you'll see. Jessica's first month was a masterclass in doing nothing. She attended meetings where she offered vague platitudes like, we need to incentivize our top performers, without any concrete plans. She spent most of her time in closed-door meetings with Michael. She never asked my team for data, never tried to understand our existing processes, and treated Ben like he was her personal assistant. The team's morale plummeted. The collaborative atmosphere we'd spent years building was replaced by a tense, uneasy silence. I tried to integrate her, to delegate projects, but she would always claim to be working on a confidential directive from Michael. The axe fell on a Tuesday. It was the end of the quarter. Michael called me into his office. Jessica was there, sitting silently in the corner, looking at her nails. "Jennifer," Michael began, his tone dripping with false sincerity. "As you know, we're always looking to optimize our operations. After a thorough review, we've decided to outsource the majority of our HR functions. Your role and those of your team have been made redundant." I was stunned. The words didn't even register at first. Outsourced to who? We built this entire department. Our employee retention is at an all-time high. The decision is final, he said coldly. Jessica will be staying on to manage the transition with the new third-party firm. So that was it. My whole team, Ben, Maria, Tom, was being kicked out for her. The golden hire wasn't a strategist, she was a replacement. He handed me a folder, "Your severance packages, standard procedure. Security will escort you and your team out." I walked out of his office in a daze. I had to go back to my desk and tell the 3 people who trusted me, who had worked so hard for this company, that they were all fired. The look on Ben's face, a mix of shock and betrayal, is something I will never forget. As we packed our boxes, Jessica didn't even look up from her computer. We were just numbers on a spreadsheet, and Michael had decided to delete the column. The first week after being fired was a blur of shock and anger. I spent days on the phone with Ben, Maria, and Tom, making sure they were okay and offering to review their resumes. We were all devastated, but something about the situation felt deeply wrong. Why fire a high-performing, cost-effective internal team for a vague, expensive outsourcing plan? Why keep Jessica, the one person with no institutional knowledge? The official reason was restructuring, but it smelled rotten. My severance package included a non-disclosure agreement that was as thick as a novel, but it couldn't stop my mind from racing. I kept replaying conversations, searching for a clue I had missed. The answer, strangely enough, came from a place of habit. For 5 years, I had received a copy of the departmental budget summaries from the CFO office. It was a routine email, one I'd gotten so used to that I'd set up an automatic filter to file it away. Out of sheer curiosity, I logged into my personal email, where I occasionally forwarded documents to review at home. And there it was, the last budget summary, sent 2 days before I was fired. I opened the file, not knowing what I was looking for. I scrolled through the expense reports, the salary projections, the departmental codes. It was all standard, boring stuff. Then I saw it. Under the sales department budget, there was a line item I'd never seen before. Strategic Consulting Services $250,000. That was a huge expense for a single quarter, especially for a vague category like consulting. My HR team's combined annual salary was barely more than that. Why would the sales department be spending $250,000 on consulting? My heart started pounding. I referenced the vendor code with past invoices I had saved on my personal cloud drive for a project last year. The vendor code was new. It had no history. It was a ghost. Then I looked at the date the consulting contract was initiated, the exact same week Jessica Miller was hired. It couldn't be a coincidence. But why would they hide her salary under a consulting fee in the sales department budget? An HR strategist's salary should be in the HR budget, unless she wasn't being paid a normal salary. Unless the money was being funneled for some other reason. I needed more information, but I had no access to the company's systems anymore. I thought about who I could trust, who had access to the real, unfiltered financial data, and disliked Michael Clark enough to help me. The name came to me instantly, Sarah Davis. Sarah was the executive assistant to the CFO. She was a company veteran, quiet and observant, who had been there since the beginning. She had seen directors like Michael come and go. I remembered a conversation we had by the coffee machine a few months back where she'd quietly mentioned her disapproval of Michael's slick but substance-less approach. She was discreet and had access to everything. She was my only shot. I found her personal number from an old contact list and typed out a message, my hands trembling slightly. "Sarah, it's Jennifer Vance. I know this is out of the blue, but I need your help. Something is very wrong at Innovatech, and I think it's hidden in the finances. Can you talk?" Sarah replied within the hour. Her message was simple: coffee shop, tomorrow 8 a.m. The next morning, I was sitting in a corner booth when Sarah slid in across from me, looking exactly as she always had, calm, professional, and unreadable. She listened intently as I laid out my story. The forced hire of Jessica, the sudden firing of my entire team, and the mysterious $250,000 consulting fee in Michael's budget. I showed her the budget summary on my laptop. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she studied the line item. I never liked him, she said, her voice low. He bullies his way through everything. The CFO has had his suspicions about Michael's expense reports for months, but he always manages to explain them away. She took a sip of her tea. A consulting firm with no name paid out of the sales budget, that's not just unusual, it's a violation of internal controls. The CFO would never knowingly approve that. She promised to look into it. I can't access everything without raising flags, she warned, but I can look at the raw payment authorizations and vendor setup forms. Give me 2 days. Those 2 days were the longest of my life. I spent the time calling Ben and updating him. His initial shock had hardened into a cold anger. Whatever you need, Jen, he said, I'm in. His tech skills were exactly what I needed. True to her word, Sarah contacted me 2 days later. The information she sent was a bombshell. The Strategic Consulting Service was a shell corporation, an LLC registered just 2 months ago. She sent me a screenshot of the vendor registration form. Michael Clark had personally signed off on it, bypassing the standard multi-level approval process by marking it as an emergency operational expense. But the most damning piece of information was the name listed as the sole proprietor of the LLC. It wasn't some anonymous consultant. It was Jessica Miller. It all clicked into place. Jessica wasn't just a golden hire. She was a ghost employee, a fraud. Michael had hired her under a fake consulting contract to pay her an exorbitant off-the-books salary. He fired my entire team so no one in HR would be around to question her bizarre role or notice that she wasn't on the official company payroll. He was using the sales department's bloated budget to hide her existence. $250,000 for 1/4 of consulting was an insane amount of money, far more than any senior HR strategist would ever make. But why go to such lengths? It had to be more than just wanting his own person in HR. I called Ben immediately and forwarded him the documents from Sarah. Ben, I need you to do what you do best. Dig into this LLC. Dig into Jessica Miller. Dig into Michael Clark. There's a connection here we're not seeing. Ben was relentless. He spent the next 24 hours scouring the internet, social media, and public records. The next afternoon, he called me, his voice tight with excitement. I found it, Jen. I found the connection. He sent me a link to a series of photos on Jessica's public social media profile. They were from a family reunion 2 years ago. In one of the photos, Jessica was standing with her arm around a smiling Michael Clark. The caption read, "So great catching up with my favorite cousin, Mike." It was the final piece of the puzzle. Michael hadn't just hired a crony. He'd hired his cousin. He'd invented a role for her, fired my entire team to cover it up, and was paying her a ridiculous sum of money through a fake company. This wasn't just corporate politics. This was fraud, and I had the proof. Armed with the truth, my first instinct was pure rage. I wanted to storm into the office and expose Michael for the snake he was. But I knew a public outburst would just make me look unhinged. They would discredit me, bury the evidence, and I would have sacrificed everything for nothing. I needed a stage. I needed an audience that Michael couldn't control. I needed to present my case in a way that was undeniable and inescapable. The annual shareholder and board meeting was in 2 weeks. It was the one time a year that the entire company leadership, including the CEO and the board of directors, were all in one room, focused on the health and integrity of the company. It was the perfect venue. My plan was simple but audacious. I wasn't going to leak the information. I was going to present it myself. First, I reached out to Maria and Tom, the other 2 members of my fired team. I explained the situation and what I had found. Their anger mirrored my own, and they immediately offered their help. We had work to do. Ben continued his digital deep dive. He uncovered that Michael's personal finances were a mess. He had 2 recent failed real estate ventures and was deep in debt. The $250,000 wasn't just for his cousin. It was a slush fund. Ben managed to find publicly available documents showing Michael was also the co-signer on the LLC business bank account. He was paying himself, not just Jessica. This was embezzlement. Maria, our payroll expert, took the financial data from Sarah and turned it into a clear, concise forensic analysis. She created charts and graphs that showed the flow of money from Innovatech's sales budget straight to the shell company. She highlighted how the sum was disguised and how it bypassed all standard financial controls. Her work transformed a complex financial crime into a simple, devastating story. Tom, our benefits and policy guru, drafted a formal report detailing the litany of company policies Michael had violated. It covered everything from conflicts of interest and hiring protocols to financial ethics and termination procedures. He cited every clause and precedent, building an airtight legal and ethical case against him. My job was to put it all together. I compiled everything into a single, powerful presentation. I rehearsed it over and over, making sure my delivery was calm, factual, and impossible to refute. But there was still one problem. How would I get into the board meeting? I was a fired employee. Security wouldn't even let me in the building. Once again, Sarah Davis was the key. I called her and explained the plan. I asked her if there was any way she could get me on the agenda. She was quiet for a moment. Getting you on the agenda is impossible, she said. But the CFO is presenting the quarterly financial review at 10 a.m. He uses a presentation remote. I'm the one who loads the presentation onto the laptop and makes sure it's running. I could add your presentation to the end of his. It was a huge risk for her. If we were caught, she would be fired instantly. Michael Clark is a cancer in this company, she said, her voice firm. It's time someone cut him out. The plan was set. Sarah would add my slides to the CFO deck. When his presentation ended, I would walk into the room. Security might stop me, but the sudden appearance of a fired manager at a board meeting would cause enough confusion for me to get started. I had about 30 seconds to get their attention before I was thrown out. I prepared my opening line carefully. I sent a message to the team, it's time, see you on the other side. The morning of the board meeting, I put on my best suit, the one I used to call my armor. I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was still there, but it had been forged into a sharp, focused resolve. I sat in the same coffee shop across the street from the Innovatech headquarters, waiting for a text from Sarah. Ben, Maria, and Tom were in a group chat, sending messages of support. At 10:25 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. CFO was wrapping up now. I took a deep breath, walked out of the coffee shop, and crossed the street. I strode through the lobby with the confidence of someone who belonged there, nodding at the receptionist as I walked past her toward the executive conference rooms. I could hear the muffled sound of the CFO finishing his remarks. As he said, and that concludes the financial review. I pushed the door open and walked in. Every head in the room turned. There were about 15 people there, the CEO, the entire C-suite, and the external board members. Michael Clark was sitting near the head of the table. His face went from confusion to pure rage in a split second when he saw me. "What is she doing here? Security," he yelled, standing up. 2 board members looked startled. The CEO, a man named Mr. Harrison, looked utterly baffled. "Jennifer, what's the meaning of this?" I ignored Michael and looked directly at Mr. Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, my name is Jennifer Vance. As you know, I was your head of HR for 5 years until my entire department was terminated 3 weeks ago. I am here today because I have uncovered evidence of significant financial fraud and ethical misconduct being committed by your director of sales." Michael Clark. The room fell silent. Michael sputtered, "This is outrageous. She's a disgruntled former employee." "Then you won't mind if I take 5 minutes to present my evidence," I said calmly, nodding toward the giant screen at the front of the room. On cue, Sarah, standing discreetly by the laptop, clicked the remote. The CFO final slide vanished, and my first slide appeared. It had a simple title, Project Nightingale, an internal audit. For the next 5 minutes, I didn't stop. I walked them through the whole story. I showed them the shell company, the vendor form with Michael's signature, the public records linking him to the bank account, and the social media photos of him with his cousin, Jessica Miller. I presented Maria's financial charts showing the $250,000 payment. I read excerpts from Tom's policy report detailing every rule Michael had broken. Michael was melting down. "Lies, this is all fabricated," he shouted. I turned to my final slide. It was a simple question. I request that the board authorize an immediate, independent audit of the sales department's budget and all vendor contracts approved by Mr. Clark. If I am wrong, I will accept the legal consequences. I looked at the CFO. "Sir, you can verify the payment authorization in your own system right now. The vendor is Strategic Consulting Services." The CFO, looking pale, immediately turned to his laptop. The room was deathly quiet as he typed. After a moment, he looked up at the CEO, his expression grim. The payment is there. It's exactly as she described. The dam broke. Michael Clark stood up, pointed a shaking finger at me, and started yelling about slander and lawsuits. But no one was listening to him anymore. The CEO looked at Michael, his face cold as stone. Michael, sit down and be quiet. He then looked at me. MS Vance, thank you. Please wait outside. We will handle this. I nodded, turned around, and walked out of the conference room, my head held high. As the door clicked shut behind me, I heard the CEO voice, no longer confused, but filled with fury. Michael, you have a lot of explaining to do. I had thrown the grenade. Now all I could do was wait for the explosion. I didn't have to wait long. I went back to the coffee shop and ordered a celebratory drink. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Mr. Harrison, the CEO. His voice was tired but firm. Jennifer. He said, I cannot thank you enough for your courage and integrity. What you did today was extraordinary. He explained that Michael had confessed to everything once confronted with the undeniable proof. He had been fired on the spot, and the company's legal team was already involved to determine the extent of the embezzlement and pursue criminal charges. Jessica Miller was also terminated, her consulting contract voided. Mr. Harrison offered me my job back with a promotion and a significant raise. He even offered to rehire my entire team. I was tempted. It was the ultimate vindication, a chance to go back and reclaim what was rightfully mine. But as I thought about it, I realized something had changed within me. The trust was broken. I could never work in that environment again, always wondering who else had known or suspected something but stayed silent. Innovatech was part of my past, not my future, Mr. Harrison. I said respectfully, I appreciate the offer more than you know, but I have to decline. However, I do have a counter-proposal. The next week, I met with Ben, Maria, and Tom. I told them about the CEO offer and my refusal. Then I laid out my new idea. We were a great team. I said, we built an incredible HR department from scratch. Why don't we do it again, but for ourselves? We decided to pool our severance money and start our own HR consulting firm. We would offer our expertise, building cultures, streamlining processes, handling compliance, to startups and mid-sized companies that needed HR guidance but couldn't afford a full-time department. We would build something that was truly ours based on the same principles of integrity and a people-first approach that we had championed at Innovatech. Our first client, ironically, was Innovatech. As part of a settlement for wrongful termination, which their lawyers were more than happy to offer to keep the scandal quiet, they signed a 1-year retainer with our new firm to help them clean up the mess Michael had made and rebuild their HR department properly. It was the perfect start. The money gave us the capital we needed, and the our client gave us instant credibility. Today, our firm, Vance and Associates, is thriving. We have a growing list of clients who value our honest, no-nonsense approach. Ben is our technology and recruitment wizard, Maria handles all things finance and payroll, and Tom is the undisputed expert on policy and employee relations. I get to be the strategist, the leader, the builder, just like before, but this time it's on our own terms. We built a new family from the ashes of the old one. Sometimes getting fired isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the push you need to finally write your own.